In multiplayer, they gave people like 100,000 deaths on their account. I think that's like a 200 IQ if that's actually what they're doing.
A very evil person is calling the shots here.
They're gonna make so much money.
Why does the Exfil system suck so much right now?
That's a waste of time.
Today on the No Nonsense podcast, I'm talking to Jaygot. He's got 1 million YouTube subscribers, as I'll let him explain in a moment, but he's also been hustling on the Zombies camo grind recently, and he's got some really interesting opinions about the mode that are a little different to what we usually hear inside the Zombies bubble. So I think it's a really interesting conversation, and it's one that I really enjoyed, and I think you guys are going to like as well. So as we chat, let us know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with any of our takes, and I'll see you at the end.
So I've been making content for about 7 years. My name is JGOD. I primarily cover or is known for Warzone, even though I've made like over 1,000 multiplayer videos. And I've done some camo grinding zombies style videos. I just don't get too deep in the other stuff because a lot of heavy hitters like yourself to compete with. So it's like, I'll just stay in my own lane and do my Warzone stuff. But in general, I've been covering content for a while. I'm more data driven on the analysis side. So I see things from a lot of that perspective. With the ramp up in SBMM, I've played much less of multiplayer and much more of zombies. And even went back to do a lot of the zombies in some of the older games, or even more recently to make sure I was caught up before this game came out.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So went through the Cold War ones. We did Cold War most recently. Before this, I had done some other ones in the past.
Okay.
We did Black Ops 4 before. I mean, more recent. So it's at least following kind of some of the stuff that we've are in this game and kind of see where they come from.
Yeah. Sick. Okay, cool. So you've got a wealth of experience on the MP Warzone side, and then you also have a pretty good amount of experience, to be honest, on the zombie side. And one thing that you definitely have more experience with than I do, even within zombies, is the camo grind. Because historically, that's not been something that I've chased ever, really. And my sort of mentality with it is very much, if I want to make like 3 videos a day, how the hell am I going to do that if I'm also grinding camos, right? Like, I'm so driven to try and make sure I'm covering all those bases. So for you, I would love to hear, and maybe we can use this as our sort of jumping into our first topic. For you, just looking at like the Cold War camo system to now, give me a little bit of a compare and contrast on how you thought it was for zombies in that game, and then what you think has been better this year and what you think is worse.
So there's a few differences. Even with Modern Warfare Zombies, it was a little different.
Sure, okay.
And I think originally in Cold War, a lot of people right now, they're complaining, 2,000 headshots, it's way too many. But in Cold War, it was 2,500 headshots, and you needed like 3,000 pack-a-punch or something like that. And you needed the rapid kills, and you needed the elites. You need 15 versus in this for Nebula, you need 10. But I think one of the biggest differences between Cold War and this game is Cold War was tied to the leveling system. So if you happen to do your camos or leveling in multiplayer or one of the other modes available ahead of time, and then you just jumped into zombies, you could literally see progress on all of your challenges at once.
And that's because your gun had already leveled up, right?
Correct. So you weren't gatekept by the level. Essentially, it almost ends up being 1-to-1 unless you just despise multiplayer or refuse to touch it. Then obviously it's going to be a little bit of a struggle in zombies because the leveling in zombies was awful in Cold War. I don't know if you knew the strat, maybe you did at the beginning, where it was like you go up to round 7, then you like close the game. Round 7, close the game. Yep. Because the Exfil, or not the Exfil, but the XP would just drop off after that point. You get super diminishing returns. And we would even do it with a 4-person lobby where you get 1 bullet in each of the zombies so that there's more zombies spawning in, and then you get the XP by round 7. I mean, it was super min-max. So it was a bad system in terms of leveling. But the nice part about the Cold War is you were able to do all the camos simultaneously. In this one, even though the leveling's not holding you back, you are severely gatekept by doing like an order of operations. You have to do your crits before you can do the specials, before you can, or your special camos.
Yep.
Before you can do the opal, which will be the gold, and then the opal, which you need 30 elites or specials, 30 specials, 30 manglers, and then after you've done that one, you got to get not hit 20 kills 10 times, there's 200 zombies. And then after that, then you got to do 10 elites. So it feels like, man, I just killed probably 15 elites up to this point before I start getting my 10 elites. So it's kind of like you didn't get credit for doing the work you've already done. The same thing with the manglers. By the time you need to get to 30 manglers, odds are you've already killed over 30 manglers. So it's like a little bit weird. So I feel like it would be less punishing if they scaled back on some of these, because I think they're fine if it worked like Cold War, where you had access to all the challenges simultaneously and you got credit for all of them.
Right.
That's not necessarily realistic with the system. So I think it'd be better for them to scale them back to make them more attainable.
Yeah.
I went through and I did them all. I mean, you do your 2 hours to get your crits, or roughly, and then you do your whatever, and then you got to do one category so you can do your opals while you're doing your other gun, and then you really kind of don't have enough mats to make both guns good.
Yeah, so
you're playing like a weaker version. Yeah.
Let's zoom into that a little bit. So in MP in this game, you got to do your 100 headshots, and it's good. It's a simple system, and it's something that it doesn't feel like you're constantly being pushed out of your regular play style in order to do it. You're just getting those headshots, and that's good, right? Simplified. Whereas in this here, because you're gatekept on those various challenges where you can't worry about getting those later challenges progressed until you've done the earlier ones, it means that you end up with lots of guns at different places in the grind, right? And that then means that you're like, okay, this one gun I need Mangler kills with, whereas this gun I need headshots with. So let me triple pack-a-punch my headshots gun and get as many headshots as I can. But then if I see a Mangler spawn in, I'm going to switch to the other gun. It's going to be like gray rarity, pack one, pitiful, like absolute pea shooter. And you're going to be pouring ammo into it, totally knocked out of your normal flow compared to, again, MP, where you're just doing MP stuff. You're playing the game as you normally would, right? And so you're playing zombies in a way that is basically objectively not fun, just so you can do those challenges because they're so oppressive in the quantities that they ask for, that if you're not doing that, it's going to take you an absurd amount of time, right, to get through all those challenges. I mean, if you had to estimate, and maybe just some back of the napkin math can happen here, but if you were going to get to Nebula without any cheeses, without juggling your guns even, like not really fully min-maxing, just sort of playing, are we talking like, is that like 1,000 hours of gameplay? Like, is it something
I don't know
that outrageous?
how long it would be, but the juggling definitely cuts the time quite a bit, because literally doing two at once. For me, it was about 100 hours to do it all. And that's like trying to min-max as much as possible, going to the right rounds, hitting the mystery box. Maybe I could have min-maxed it a little bit more using gobbles, the gobblegums.
Sure.
To maybe get like pack-a-punch out of the box, and then, you know, I save 5K there or something. But overall, it would probably take a few hundred hours. Yeah. Especially.
Ouch. Yeah. I mean, I think it's weird because Treyarch really did make a big point before this game came out of saying, we've looked at the progression systems in previous games and we want to very consciously do things that are going to be more like player friendly this year, right? And it sounds like in MP, they've checked those boxes and people are pretty happy, I think. And I think it's almost like there's just been a little bit of oversight with some of the order of operations in zombies, where if those order of operations were removed, for instance, that would be the extreme version, this problem would just magically disappear. But granted, they want to make sure that there's a decent amount of grind in the grind. And so I think that they've sort of over-indexed on the order of operations, but they've also then still got a significant number of kills that you need to get, and all of those quantities are it's still quite a big ask, right? So that's where it comes back to what you said before of saying, ultimately, based on how the system works, rather than stripping the system out, that's going to be impossible. They're never going to do that. But they absolutely could say, okay, sure, 2,000 kills here or 2,000 headshots here is less than the Cold War 2,500, but based on the fact that you then have this sequential grind after the fact, maybe it does make sense for that to just be 1,000 or something, and they can just tweak the categories accordingly. Is that more or less in line with what you're saying?
Pretty much, because by the time I've done it all with one gun, I've probably gotten 4,000 headshots or 3,000. Right. You know, if I'm actually doing it the way, like one gun at a time, and killing all those zombies and then waiting for those manglers to spawn, which go from 0 to 100 after 31.
Quite literally, like on round 31, all in round 31. So that actually is a point that you made before the call here that I think this is a good segue into. So as you're doing that grind, right, if you're getting, if you're aiming for as many Mangler kills as possible, for example, then you were telling me that you get about 15 Manglers rounds 0 to 30. And then between, what did you say, rounds 30 and
around 31 up to about 35, you'll get another 15.
Okay, perfect. And so you're targeting that 30 Mangler count, is that right?
Yeah, so if you start at the beginning, you'll go up to around 34. And then what's crazy is if you go up to around 40, you'll end up with an additional 25 Manglers. So you can almost do 2 guns in one match if you could just go 6 more rounds. But again, then you end up with the dilemma where the guns are weak and whatever at that point. So it's kind of like impractical.
Yeah, like I feel like a constellation of problems kind of emerge at this point. So one of them is the game length thing, which I want to talk about in just a second here.
Yep.
One of them is the points system and the new point system that we have nowadays, which is so drastically different to the original Zombies point system, and that there's a huge amount of contention around because Treyarch have said that, like, we're going back to round-based zombies and all that sort of stuff, but then you have the new point system that really limits you and makes you feel kneecapped and held back in a variety of areas. So that's also a problem there. And you then have the overall gun balance sort of struggle that you have as well. And the gun balance really is informed by both of those two things. So we've got a suite of options here. This is a branching storyline of pick your poison. Which direction should we go in? We've got 3 choices here. Choose your own adventure. Where should we start for tackling this, do you think?
I think maybe the weapon balancing. I don't know. Sure. I feel like that's the 30 to 40. I think inherently people will argue that, like, oh, all your guns should drop off around there and it should get hard because that's the way it's always been. But personally, I feel like you should be wanting players to stay in the match as long as possible. And realistically at that, even the ray gun falls off hard in those, like super hard. It's like it's taking you 5 shots to kill a base zombie with armor. That's a problem or whatever. So if it's triple packed, okay, cool. You know?
Let's give some historical context here for people at home who are maybe newer to zombies, who just want to sort of hear, like, why do people care about this so much, right? Like, why is it such a big problem? So I'm gonna noodle for 2 minutes, then we can tap back in.
Cool.
Back in the day, in Zombies on World at War, for instance, you have a very hard ceiling where you can no longer become any more powerful beyond a certain point. You basically kind of hit your, let's say, round 30, round 40, whatever it is, and your pack-a-punch guns are going to basically do nothing. And your only option at that point is twofold. It's 1, your traps on the map that will always kill zombies, and number 2 is your wonder weapon. So that was the old school system. Back in the day, OG, that's how it worked. And it meant that if you wanted to get to those high rounds, you basically had to start repeating some kind of 60-second loop of gameplay that involved either a wonder weapon or it involved a trap, and there was no other option. You just genuinely didn't have another path. Then we got to Black Ops 3, and the devs said, hold on a second, we have a very repetitive gameplay loop happening as soon as people start hitting round 40, let's say, and that sucks. Like, we can do better than that. How can we give them more opportunity for player expression through different systems that are in the game? And so that's where alternate ammo types came from, where in Black Ops 3, you've got a suite of different ammo types that all have different impacts on the gameplay, but the crucial thing is that they consistently keep killing. And so you can use a bullet gun just as much as you can use a wonder weapon, and you're okay. You can still get away with using that bullet gun at those high rounds and have some kind of impact. Like, your agency is not lost to the fact that the zombies have an infinite health cap. Or no health cap, sorry. Then we move forwards past Black Ops 3 into Black Ops 4 and more sort of seriously into Cold War, and things change drastically. So Cold War introduces this idea of these new ammo types and the new point system, and Black Ops 4 had the new point system as well, but there were a lot more of the newer sort of changes solidified in Cold War, and we ended up with a completely different zombies health system as well. So in Cold War, for the first time, zombies do more damage at higher rounds. So round 1, you can take, I think it's 14 hits or something, if you have armor, whereas if you get to, let's say, round 50, you can take about 4 or 5. And alongside that, you have changes to the intentionality, I think, for the player of killing zombies with wonder weapons, yes. Killing zombies with traps as well, yes. But then also, there's a little bit more of a goal for your ammo types to still be relevant, but it's sort of a little bit more of a backseat compared to where it was in Black Ops 3. So they sort of walked that back a tiny bit. That's my 2-minute noodle. We then get to Black Ops 6. In this game, it feels like the power curve, similar to sort of World at War, let's say, in Black Ops 1, pretty abruptly hits a ceiling where you no longer have an option to pack-a-punch your gun further. You no longer have an option for your, if it was like a Black Ops 3 or something, like your VMP or whatever bullet gun you might be choosing, or a Black Ops 6, let's say you've got Tanto or something, it's just going to hit a ceiling and then you're kind of stuffed. And the argument that I think is brewing in the zombies community is that fine or not, right? And your position in that, and I'll let you elaborate on this in just a second, is more or less, it's bad design if you shoehorn and funnel players into one singular type of gameplay expression and you don't give them options to actually use the weapon sandbox that you have in front of you, whereas the more hardcore old school players perhaps more typically would align with the idea that your guns are meant to fall off. They might be falling off a bit early right now, but they are still meant to fall off, and you are meant to ultimately be funneled towards wonder weapons or traps. So, with all of that established, talk to me. Your position, did I characterize it accurately?
Yeah, I think you did a pretty good job of characterizing it. I think where it comes to be kind of an issue is something we brought up right before, is that like one of the big complaints about Modern Warfare Zombies was that there was a hard limit on how long you could be in a match. 45 minutes, and you had the 15 minutes for the zone. And technically you could jump into one of the missions or do one of the types of things, and then you can elongate your playtime an extra half an hour. So maybe if you're getting the full length of time, maybe you're spending an hour and 20 minutes in one instance of a match where you continue doing something. Essentially, this soft cap that happens right around 31 essentially accomplishes the same thing. In my opinion, I feel like it accomplishes the same problem, where if you've played up to that point, it probably took you about 45 minutes to an hour to get to around there, and then everything just hits the wall, and you got to exfil or just leave the match, or do one of these strats that you've mentioned. And if you're looking at anyone doing the high round, they're essentially doing one strat or a variation of the one strat. And I think that's fine for people that want to go super high rounds. That makes perfect sense. But I think there is a larger window that they could have players in the match for. Up to 40, if that's the number, or up to 50, I think would be kind of cool, especially since they have that Dark Ops challenge tied to Terminus. It would make sense that if you didn't have to use some weird strat to accomplish it, you could just use the base guns, pack-a-punched and legendary, and you'd have tons of materials to do whatever you wanted at that point in the match. And I so it's just like a different philosophy. Obviously, like you said, there's probably hardcore people who are like, it's fine, that's the way it's been. But realistically, wanting to be in the match longer would be ideal without having to go, you know what? Let me go build, the wonder weapons so that we can go sit on a zip line or in a corner where the zombies only spawn in one section. We'll do this for the next 4 hours. Like, that's...
So if we zoom into that then, because I have some theories about this, but I'd be curious your perspective, especially because you have so much more experience than me on the Warzone and the MP side. And that gives you a completely different insight into the way the devs are going to be approaching their decision-making, etc. Why do you think they might want to cap the game time out at that 45-minute to 1 hour mark? Like, what is your theory or guess for what that serves for Activision and for Treyarch's interests?
I would say it's hard to say, because initially when we played it at COD Next, obviously Duke Dennis went up to 50 plus or whatever, and it was just like the easiest mode, and it got kind of a little bit of backlash in terms, not because of that, but because of the he got to round 50 with ease without even necessarily trying, no strat. And essentially, like, they may have overcorrected to compensate for the feedback, because there was a lot of feedback from a lot of the well-known Zombies creators giving very big feedback around that, and the communities rallied behind that without a lot of people actually getting a chance to experience it. I do agree that was probably way too easy, and where they've landed is probably too harsh. There's probably a middle point where they'll tune the needle. But that goes back to kind of the original tweet that I mentioned yesterday, which was that it's really hard to find the data point. Where is the fall off really happening for players? Is it round 33 when you have 4 Manglers jump out at once and all of their little blasts are in sequence and you can't dodge them? They go through everything. It feels like they curve around walls. Like
they really do.
And it's like, well, where is that when there's so many people glitching? I'm sure it skews off the number. literally after every little playlist update, God glitch still works. Use this. You can do the boats. You can go inside the shack on Liberty Falls. You can do the bowling alley before they patch that.
Yep.
And it's like every day, oh, you know what? You got to do the turtle shell with the other thing. And it's like, bro, what are we doing here?
Yeah. So, okay, let's pause on that point just for a moment. I just want to give you guys a heads up about this video's sponsor. So I want to say a big thank you to them. It's Surfshark, and their VPN is really useful, genuinely. So I've been using the Surfshark VPN for honestly about 5 years now, and any time in my life there's something that is geographically blocked. So for example, I could be trying to watch a certain thing on American Netflix, but I'm in the UK. In all those situations, it's Surfshark that I go to on my PC. I've got it on my desktop here. I've got it on my laptop as well. It works on as many devices as you want. You just need one subscription. It's all your devices, and it does all the VPN stuff. Like, you can connect to servers from basically anywhere in the world, from wherever you might be, but also it's making sure that your data is secure, that your connection is private, that it's encrypted. And if you want to get started and give it a go for yourself and unblock some shows or unblock some stores if you're buying other regional things, then all you've got to do is go to surfshark.com/MiloVPN. It's linked in the description down below, and you'll be able to get yourself 4 free months on top of the discount that they're already running. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. And thank you so much, Surfshark, for sponsoring the channel and helping power all my zombies content. I want to spitball a theory here with you, and you can tell me whether you think it's bogus or you think there might be some validity to it.
Cool.
And I'm not opposed to being told that you think that this is silly. So, in my understanding of how the actual game infrastructure works now that it's always online, and now that we're playing server-based zombies for the first time ever, like we're forced to, there is no other option. What that does is it creates a few different challenges for the devs to solve. One is it means that anytime you're like loading into a match, if you're matchmaking or whatever, like if we take Modern Warfare Zombies actually as an example, Modern Warfare Zombies is the best use or example case for this. You had to load in with other players, right? Which means that you have to load in with a lobby that's populated with other players, which means that you have to be continuously finding new games so that you can populate with other players. And so I think that in Modern Warfare Zombies, an outcome of their need to fill lobbies, just as in Warzone, if you had a Warzone game that lasted 10 hours, everyone would be in game. If you were matchmaking, it would take ages to find a new game because you'd be waiting for other games to finish, right? Because if they keep the game length down, it means that turnover is higher, and so there's generally more people in queue waiting for the next match. So I think that appeared in Modern Warfare Zombies for the first time ever, and the devs essentially went, okay, we are now building an experience that needs to end at a certain point so that the overall design goal that we have here, which is big team zombies, like big map zombies, can be realized. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. My fear is that philosophy originally came from the same philosophy as, like, Warzone is cool, we've built out all this Warzone tech, what can we do with this Warzone tech, right? And so that informed Modern Warfare Zombies, which I think is undeniable. I think that definitely was present there.
The DMZ part of it, for sure, undeniable.
Yeah. So that was very much present within that mode. And my, I guess, concern is that Treyarch, when sort of at the drawing board for Black Ops 6 Zombies, having also just developed Modern Warfare Zombies, at least for the first pre-launch period, and then also for the first, whatever it was, 4 months or something, I fear that they were like, okay, we have built a bunch of Warzone tech stuff, and that's been a lot of what we've been pulled away from our baby, Black Ops 6, in order to do. So we could either use a lot of those learnings and those philosophies and those goals that we have from the Warzone kind of zombies side of things and already be at 50% completion or already have made a bunch of progress and already have a bunch of stuff built, or we could say, just from a design philosophy perspective, we don't want to do that. That's not the type of experience we want to build. Therefore, let's build something else, but we'll build it from ground zero, right? And my concern is that they've said, well, building from ground zero, whether it's going to be technologically difficult, whether it's going to be that they can't fit it inside the development window, which would be fair enough. Like, I know those devs work so unbelievably hard to try and do what they need to do. So like, that's no issue with laziness or anything like that. It's literally just the Sisyphean task of putting out a zombies game or a Call of Duty game every year. But My concern is that because the Warzone stuff was built in the first place, now the Warzone stuff is built and the other stuff is not built. And therefore the balance is always going to be, well, we have the Warzone stuff, so let's do the Warzone stuff. And that means that the following year, it's like, well, we have the Warzone stuff, so let's do the Warzone stuff. And so what my suspicion is that has meant that as we've gone into this year, they are geared up to build 45-minute experiences. Like, they are sharp. That tool in their tool shed is locked and loaded. It's ready to go. They've got a lot of experience using it. And to do the other thing would have been a risk, and therefore they're not going in that direction. Like, they're not building a zombies experience that could extend in an interesting and meaningful way to 50 and to that, let's say, 2-hour mark or 3-hour mark, not because they can't do it, but because realistically, they're like, we've already built the 45-minute experience. We already know what the flow is going to be like. We already know the loop. We can kind of not worry about the other stuff because the high round grinders, they'll figure it out. Like, they'll find some kind of unfun way to play the game and they'll do it because they want the high round. But screw them, right? Like, let's just worry about that core 45-minute experience. And to some extent, it makes sense to prioritize the experiences that the majority of your player base is going to be having. And most zombies players, as we discussed before the call,
yes,
realistically are probably getting to like round 12, if that. And we've both seen how much randoms die in zombies, and when you're queuing with those public players, they suck. So the data is there for you to sort of observe should you desire to.
Anecdotally, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So in that regard, those players aren't getting past 30. So sure, design the experience for 1 to 30. Like, I kind of get from a big data perspective the need there. It's just that we have a very vocal minority community here that really care about the 30 plus, right? And especially with the camo grind, when the camo grind is pushing you to those future rounds so that you can actually make that meaningful progress, suddenly it's like, okay, I feel like there are probably hardcore zombies people that are not going to as high rounds as MP and Warzone people, because the MP and Warzone people are only forcing themselves into those unfun gameplay loops so they can get their camos. And then everything is wrong. Like, all the wires are plugged in the wrong places there. So do you feel like my crackpot theory here is...
I think that's plausible. I think that they could view it. I don't know if maybe it's just an overcorrection like I was saying earlier. I do think it's plausible that they could view the game in 3 different parts, right? Like, you'd have the 1 to 30, 30 to 50, and then 50 to plus.
Yep.
Right? All the way to 999. They raised the cap, right?
Yep.
Before the 256. So I think it's plausible. And I would honestly say that 1 through 31 is like almost perfect. Like if you're just doing one gun, you're doing Easter egg solo or in a group, 1 to 31 feels great. Like the where you go, the amount of zombies that are rushing you, the amount of armor. It's like if I think they did 1 through 31 very well.
Mm-hmm.
Then, like I said, that's where it gets a little bit wonky from those next 20 rounds, where it's unrealistic to even push it with a majority of the weapons. So I think there's like 3 people, 0.2, maybe 4 non-wonder weapon, right?
Right.
You got the pistols, right, which are obviously found pretty early. You have the sniper rifle that essentially does the same thing, and then maybe a couple, like 1 or 2 other weapons that are like hidden gems that somehow have higher bullet penetration on armor, and just coincidentally that gives them an advantage in the later rounds.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I mostly agree that 1 to 30 is very well tuned. The exception for me right now is any instance where you are knocked off your flow for some reason makes a lot of problems appear that you never normally see in your runs. So for instance, the other day, I realized I was in a co-op game and I had an augment that I hated and I wanted to change it.
I saw it. I was watching.
It was very painful. This was a painful
the
experience.
Amalgam brutalized you.
Yes, yeah. So I was like, the amalgam is going to toast me during this run if I keep on turtle shell right now. So I was like, okay, my options are either I just suck it up and I probably die during the boss fight because I'm going to get sucked in by an amalgam, or I quit out of the game, try and switch my augment real quick, load back in, point back up again, and I'll be good. But the point back up again part of the process in this game is horrendous. It is absolutely atrocious.
31 plus for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it exacerbated 31 plus 100%, but even beforehand, because you're loading in with a weapon that is just ultimately limited in the amount of damage it's going to be able to do at any given point, and you're not able to gain points from hits on zombies, you're really kneecapped because you have to be getting the kills, but you're not powerful enough to get the kills. So
100%.
Those sorts of elements, I think, are problems that are caused by the new point system, which is a whole sphere of debate and discussion in itself, I think. I think it's one of the main things that I would say if I had to critique this game. I think a lot of the problems I have with it actually do come down to points at the end of the day. I think it's a fundamental part of the game that is not broken right now, I would say, but in need of some love and some attention, I think, from Treyarch. It's not quite in the place that I think it needs to be. But that's a systems level change that I think they need to make, not like let's make it so that you get an extra 5 points per kill or something. I think they need to just think about the point system in general. Yeah, it doesn't solve the problem
that you brought up right now. It doesn't solve that.
Right, yeah. So with all that said, you started making a really interesting point about how Treyarch makes these decisions and how that's going to be harder for them given the fact that right now in the community, we have, let's say, a handful of cohorts of players, right? We've got the hardcore zombies people that love round-based and they're excited round-based is back. We've got the Cold War zombies people that like the new Cold War systems and they're just playing Cold War 2.0 and they're loving that.
With gobblegums.
With gobbles now as well. So maybe you've got some BO3 people in there as well. You've got Warzone and MP people, or actually, let's split those up. You've got MP people that want something else to play when SBMM just kicks their ass too much and they're like, I want to break, right?
Yep.
You've got Warzone people who are waiting for new Warzone stuff because obviously pre-season 1, you're just waiting around, right? You're sort of twiddling your thumbs to some extent. So that's already 4 cohorts of players, and I'm sure within that you could break it down tenfold. I'm sure that there's infinite player archetypes we could talk about, right? But in some... Actually, let me add one more. Game Pass players, who I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know if they are thinking. I think that they are just in the game everywhere, like lemmings, doing everything that is possible at all times. That's sort of how I think about the Game Pass sort of cohort.
They're on campaign. No.
Maybe they're rinsing the campaign like crazy. They're just spam repeating that endurance mission and grinding headshots in zombies in campaign. Who knows, right? God, can you imagine if that actually tracked? That'd be crazy.
Imagine.
So in that regard, we've got so many different types of players now. And so that's already difficult for Treyarch to be like, okay, the player base is doing this, so let's do that. When they zig, we'll zag here, right? There's 5 zigs happening. So it's difficult. But the difficulty that you identified, that I'll let you continue to explain here, is where glitches and these exploits and things start coming into the picture. So yeah, talk to me about your thoughts there.
So like I was mentioning, there's so many glitches. It's like literally as soon as there's a playlist, and they're being proactive on fixing the glitches, but they haven't really done anything consequence-wise. They usually stay away from that. To my knowledge, they really haven't done anything like that.
You're talking about like banning people or like timing people out or like those sorts of things?
XP reset. They used to do that back in the day. Where, so for example, like let's say a playlist update went through this Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then you glitched for the entire week. And then a playlist went through and you gained 5 million XP. So you went up 5 prestiges. They could actually retroactively put your rank back to what it was the previous week.
Because is that something they've done before?
They've done that before. People got reset. And even back in the day, it wasn't a lot, but they did the thing where they reset people's when SBMM wasn't as prevalent.
Yeah.
In multiplayer, they gave people like 100,000 deaths on their account. So basically,
really?
They'd be reset. Yeah, they'd be reset to level 1, and essentially their KD would never go up.
Oh my God, I've never heard of that.
On their friends list.
Which game?
Original MW3 or something like that.
Wow.
Like way back.
Yeah.
So there have been punishments, but they usually try to avoid those, especially when everything's so positive about the game for the most part. They would generally stray away from that. But all it would take is one. They'd go, oh, you know what? My count got reset back to 1. Guess how many people are going to be doing glitches?
Yeah, that's going to drop off.
Basically. And I'm for that, but I don't think they'll do that. And obviously it's innocent. It's just XP, just levels. But I think it trivializes some components of the game. There's so many people with this round 100 calling card would never get to round 100. But I mean, that's just a trivialization of that. But I think there's a lot of times what happens in the studio where sometimes they make decision and whoever's ultimately in charge, somebody's bringing them a concern and they're saying, hey, well, we should probably do this. And if they agree, then they'll probably make the change. If they could put it in their to-do list somewhere, right? And in the more of a priority, it'll go up to the top of the list and it'll get worked on quickly. But I think with things like this, there might be times where the person goes to them and then we're like, well, show me the data that would support this type of change. Well, maybe there would be data if there weren't this types of stuff super inflating the rounds people are getting to around 200 so they could prestige in one match or whatever like that. Right. So I think there's elements of that where it's potentially causing issues where the person can go over and say, hey, we need to make these changes. And there's no data to support that other than feel.
Yeah.
And and I think this has happened before because when I've talked to devs, not necessarily about zombies, but in terms of Warzone where they said, oh, we couldn't do that change because the data didn't show that made sense or vice versa. It's like with third person, like it's in Zombies. Yep. I don't know, but it's not in, they eliminated the mode from Warzone. And I talked to them and they were like, well, nobody played the mode. I'm like, everyone loves the mode. Like whoever loves it, but nobody plays it, you know? So it's like, well, the data said to remove the mode, even though the people who play it love it. Yeah. And you would appeal to that niche of audience. And so I think there's sometimes decision-making where you kind of can go and they can agree on it, but maybe when they disagree, they got to bring the data to say, hey, this is what I need to do. Yeah. And I think those things happen behind the scenes and they're just not good data because the data gets washed away as soon as there's infinite round glitch, essentially, where people are just staying alive forever.
What that would essentially mean is, let's say you said to me, the game's too hard over round 30, right? That's like a common community sentiment. Game, and for whatever reason, we can ignore the reason, but let's just say it's just too hard over 30. Treyarch might look at the data and be like, what do you mean? 10% of players just got to round 200. Like, that's obviously, it's a nonsense statistic that I've just pulled up because there's no way that 10% of people are actually getting there. But, because I think I actually looked at the Steam achievements the other day and something like 0.8% or something of people had done even some of the basic Zombies achievements. So like it's a limited number. But the data is going to be completely corrupted by the fact that in those 5 cohorts of people that we talked about, like the MP Warzone people are not here to just love zombies for the sake of loving zombies. They're here because they're either trying to get a break from MP or they're trying to get camos, pretty much. And if you're trying to get camos, the most efficient way to get camos right now is not to play the game in the most fun way, which is what the zombies people might be doing, but instead it's to do the boat glitch on Terminus, or it's to eat the shroud. Time. Exactly. Like after the patch, you do it again, and after the patch, you do it again, and after the patch, one more time.
It's like Tombstone from last year, all year.
Yeah, literally. And like the Ether Shroud glitch into the shed is the one that's currently sort of the hot commodity in the community.
Yeah,
everyone's Ether Shroud glitching into the shed and then just shooting zombies forever. Or they're doing Infinite Frenzied Guard or similar things, right? And it's difficult because then Treyarch has to be like, okay, the zombies people are trying to play in one way and the MP people are doing like the polar opposite way. But the way the game is designed means there is no objectively like right or wrong way. It's just, they're just playing the game ultimately at the end of the day. And if a million more people are doing the MP thing, then does that mean that they design the game around what the MP people are doing? Well, you'd hope not, because it's exploits, and you'd hope that they'd be like, well, we know that that's not right. But there comes a point where the data has to support the decision. The data has to inform what's being done, because if they're making extra money, for instance, right? Like this is where things could get really crazy. Let's say when gobblegums become available in the store, which is happening at season 1 launch, right? Yeah, so
I believe so, yeah.
Gobblegum packs are going to be in the store, so you're going to be able to spend whatever it is. We don't actually know yet the pricing, but you'll be able to spend some amount on a pack of gobbles. When that happens, if there's a certain gobble, let's say the Free Fire gobblegum, just to pick one at random. If that Free Fire gobble is essential for some kind of, or Idolize, actually, let's go with that. If everybody wants Idolize so they can do some kind of very specific XP farm, camo farm type thing, people are going to be going bankrupt in the store. They're going to be spending all their money to try and get Idolizes, and that's going to make Activision a ton of money. So then there's this weird conflict where it's like, do we design to make another $1 billion, which they probably want to do because it's $1 billion? Or do they design a game that, without that kind of almost tainting of their philosophy, do they say, well, we're just going to make something that's fun, that we know is fun as devs, we know it's fun? That's a difficult place for them to be in.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times that also ends up where the devs want to do that. They don't even care about the microtransaction side of it. But obviously they have a boss. So this boss is the boss of a boss that's making the decision, saying do this. So they got to figure out how to do it and ethically as possible, I guess you can say. But like I was talking about earlier, I think the gobblegum system's cool. I didn't really get an experience. I didn't play much Black Ops 3 Zombies. Just at that time, I didn't play zombies. I played multiplayer or whatever. But now that I've been able to use the system, I think the system's pretty cool for what it is. I think it's even fair about the number of gobblegums you get. Sometimes you'll get them like on round 2 and it'll be like an ultra. Like, I'm like, damn, that was cool. Let me reset the save or something. Maybe we'll get another one. I don't know. No, but going all the way up to round 31, 34, you end up with like double digits in a lot of categories for most of these gobblegums.
Yep.
And I think they've really integrated them well. But like you said, with the thing, they're going to become monetized. And what I mentioned before we started the podcast is that I think this was super strategic. We kind of knew that they would do this based off the MW3 or BO3 system, where you could essentially gamble in the store, but obviously they can't do that anymore. And I mentioned that in MWZ or Modern Warfare Zombies, they got people conditioned to start the match strong.
Yep. And that was through schematics. That was the schematic system
that you essentially had to earn. Or if you bought bundles or battle passes, you would get certain items as well.
Yeah, true.
But they never full straight out sold the items in the store. Like, you get this for a legendary rent. It's not how it worked.
Yeah.
But I think they got a lot of those players conditioned to starting the match essentially overpowered. Pack a punch, triple pack, legendary with my wonder weapon. And it's like right off the rip, and then they used the tombstone glitch, and then they had it every match, and
admittedly,
it was on and on.
It was, I think, as much as people critiqued that system, one thing I can say in its favor, which is, I'm saying this with very, very narrow intentions here, I'm just saying popping a PAP 3 crystal and a wonder weapon in the first 10 seconds of a match did just feel good. It just felt good to just be like, all right, I'm a beast now. Like, I'm in tier 1 still. I've got 45 minutes left. I'm going to crush this game. Like, it was, as much as it has its own problems, and yeah, people say, we should spawn in with a cult, etc. Let's shelve that. Yeah. It just felt good to just be like, all right, I'm a beast. Let's go. And so then as we go forward into
so
Black Ops 6,
I think that conditioning was built into, for the people that are playing this Zombies, it feels kind of like, quote unquote, for the people that didn't play round base, because there's a lot that didn't play round base because their first experience with Zombies was essentially last year. Like, we know this every year. Like, somebody's first Call of Duty is Black Ops 6.
Yeah.
They've never played a Zombies before. And this happens all the time. Obviously in the COD community, where we've been playing for 15, almost 20 years, it ends up being like, oh, we don't realize that. But they got a lot of these people from MWZ that are going to come over here, and they're going to feel like, damn, the guns feel trash, whatever. They're going to realize that their gateway to feeling overpowered is the use of gobblegums. And once they get out of the store, especially if they make it so that you're going to be able to buy the ultras and the legendaries, they're going to make so much money on the people that have been conditioned that they want to start the match overpowered. Yeah. And I think that's like a 200 IQ if that's actually what they're doing. Or if they just put gobblegums in the store and it wasn't even that much thought, and I'm giving them too much credit. But they like built up that fan base that wants to start overpowered, and they'll be able to have that opportunity once they can buy all the gobblegums they want. Yeah,
I think knowing how my track record has been with being cynical of these games over the years, I think it's worth continuing that cynicism for a moment and just exploring this as like let's just assume that is the case, right? Let's assume that a very, very evil person is calling the shots here, and they're like, we want to do the most unethical thing possible to make as much money as possible, right? What would that look like? Let's at least just examine that imagined reality. I think that would look like making the base version of the game that everybody loves, like by name round-based zombies. Everyone's like, that's the thing we all fell in love with when we were younger. Like, yes, that. So it would be a base. It would be making round-based zombies, but it would then be kneecapping elements of the round-based zombies mode where you just don't feel like you can quite get that old experience that you were used to. Like something's just holding you back a little bit. And then it would be consistently gating that experience, that last piece of the puzzle behind a microtransaction, right? And this is what mobile games do all the time. As you were telling me before the call, like mobile game stores, you'll have entire data science teams and psychology teams that will be optimizing those in-game stores to really just squeeze money out of people with all sorts of weird psychological tricks. So if we're imagining this evil maxing reality, they'd be doing all of those tricks to say, okay, you want that experience that you just had, we conditioned you on for a year. Well, now to get there, this rare gobblegum pack is going to fix those problems for you in those first 7 rounds. But the rare gobblegum pack is going to be much less appealing to buy than the ultras pack or the uber pack or whatever they start calling them. Yeah. And this one's going to be bundled if you buy this skin as well. So maybe the skin comes with a mastercraft that has napalm burst by default, so you don't have to spend salvage on it. And it comes with gobblegums, so you can upgrade it. And like there's synergies there, so you're like, oh, yeah, I should spend $50 on this. And then you do that, and then 6 months later, you're like, I'm bored of this skin. I should do it again. And at that point, your overall like LTV for a player, the amount of value that you're extracting from a given player goes from an average of, let's say, averaged out over everyone, let's say the LTV is like $80 a year, like that $70 base price, and then some number above that being contributed by expected microtransaction payments. You take it, you go from $80 to suddenly it's like, well, we've just kind of got the whole player base hooked on spending $200 a year on COD, right? And
100%. With the battle passes did that too, Black Cell.
Oh, like 100%. That is essentially why it exists, right? Like it wouldn't be there if it didn't monetize the way it does. It's so effective. And so that's the maximally evil case. So if we now walk it back a bit, because I know that like the individual Treyarch devs are not maximally evil. They're all great people. They're all very 100%. Ethical people. The question that I essentially have is where between those two poles are we? And I don't know. And I will never know because I think none of us ever will, right? But I'm curious if you had to hasten a guess, like, do you think that it's likely that some of those more nefarious tricks are being employed? Or do you think that actually that's almost like conspiracy theory talk and realistically they don't go there?
I personally would say that to a certain extent it probably is. Obviously they provide us with the gobblegums essentially for free for just playing the game.
Yep.
But after about 115 hours of doing the full Nebula grind or whatever, I probably have 9 Wonder Bars. 9. So that means like 1 every 10 hours?
Yeah.
And if somebody could just go to the store and buy 10 of those, that would be like 100 hours worth of grinding.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's RNG. Probably some people have more luck or not. I think there's other things they could have done. Like we talked a little bit about introing with the Exfil thing. I think what they did in Cold War is how they incentivized Exfilling. You'd get another one of those Ethereum things, depending on and that would be the out of system economy that you could use to upgrade your stuff. Augments provide that, but that's based off XP and basically time played, you're going to get all of them. And that would have diminishing returns once you've maxed out all your augments. So I think they could have had the potential to do that, and that's where they would have put it to guarantee whether it was a legendary or higher gobble. Then you would have had those opportunities, but they didn't include that. The system basically got scrapped. Maybe it was an oversight because there's basically no reason. You're not going to exfil for a whimsical. Like,
yeah, like why does the exfil system suck so much right now? Like it's so weird, and actually it reminds me of a similar sort of energy of oversight that I feel like is present with the time-gated Easter egg rewards. It's a similar thing where, like, to my naive brain, I would look at that and go, for the devs, it's a no-brainer to make that an attractive reward to incentivize and motivate the players to do the thing that you have put so much time into and you know is going to be a kick-ass time. You know that beating that Terminus Easter egg in those first couple of weeks without guided is going to be an accomplishment that people relish for months or years, right? So why not really incentivize it. And similarly, Exfils, they've made them so crazy, they've made them more difficult. Why not incentivize that behavior? Because the game is built around exfilling in some ways. Like, there's so many of these systems that are there now. So I genuinely have no idea why it's like it, or why it is the way it is. I just don't know. I'm clueless. And I think that your idea of just giving you some ultras and stuff as part of your exfils, right? Like, if you exfilled over 30,
a chance for a legendary or higher,
yeah, instead of just a whimsical guaranteed, that would go a long way to meaning that, oh, okay, yeah, I'm on round 41. Sure, I'll bother instead of just killing myself in the game. Like, right now, I might as well just end the game. Like, it's faster.
Yeah.
I'll get into my next
More often
thing
than not,
faster.
when I was doing the camos, you'd get to like round 33.
Yeah.
When you would get to like the quote unquote halfway point of your crits, where you'd stop around 1300. I know it's more than half, but then that gives you the clearance to do the specials once you do those, so you can get gold at the end of the second match. But usually you'd be at 33, 34, and you're like, do I really want to play a match in a round and a half to exfil or just leave?
Right.
And then you just go, I'll just leave. There's not enough incentive for you to stay the extra round and a half, even though that'd probably be like 6 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time because the current system doesn't incentivize it. Yeah.
Outside of just the exfils thing, what do you think Treyarch needs to do with all of these problems in mind, right? Whether it's concerns about potential microtransaction worries, or it's the exfil system, or it's the fact that their data is kind of tainted right now. It's kind of corrupted data by the fact that there's these exploits and these glitches and all these different players doing different things and with different goals and with different motives. How should they proceed? And what is the sort of constructive answer that we can give them here, if there is one, so that 1 month from now, let's say, or 2 months from now, they've had a bit of time to cook up some responses to these things and they can implement some changes. Like, what do you think they should do next?
Well, I think realistically for the camo side of it, they could just cut down on some of the challenges. And then even make it so that after round 11, you'd get one Mangler per round.
Okay.
Because it's not guaranteed right now.
Yeah.
You get like every 3 rounds or something like that. Especially at those rounds, they're pretty easy to delete. Like, it's not like they're a worry, but then that would help with the camo side of it. And I think besides that, they don't really need a touch under round 31. I think from 31 to 40, maybe 45, they could really address the number of armored zombies that are spawning in, the number of Manglers, and potentially like how aggressive the Manglers are with their blast. Some variation of tuning, that type of stuff. So that more weapons are viable after round 33, 34, where it really has like a more of a harder cap, where, like you mentioned, you're not even getting enough kills to restock your ammo with the Pack-a-Punch 3, where you need 5,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's other things that they can do to incentivize players, like combat records would be cool. Multiplayer has it, Zombies doesn't. All you have is access to a leaderboard. It'd be nice to see my top 5 Easter egg clears or something along those lines. Maybe there's modifiers. I think they'd be cool to have modifiers for. This is something I brought up in MWZ. It would be cool to have like weekly or event-based things.
Sort of like Destiny?
Yes, 100% like Destiny, where like maybe Napalm does twice as much, like it procs twice as often this week.
Yeah.
And it's just like, cool, let's do Napalm this week. Like, just to mix it up so it doesn't feel the same. Obviously, there's going to be times where things could be abused or exploited, but I think when you introduce it into the gameplay loop, it makes it more enjoyable than people going out of their way to cheese something that just inherently is broken.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this week is going to be this event or these 2 weeks. I think there's ways they can mix up the like monotony of, okay, I go do this one and I do this way.
Yeah.
Or maybe like you get to equip 2 minor augments or something. I don't know. Like, there's different things you can do where you could say, hey, you know what? This is what we're going to do for this week or these 2 weeks. And you can actually shake up the mode a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's something which would be best implemented if it was combined with the sort of philosophy of thinking that you get from... Have you played Hades by chance?
Yeah. Hades 1 and 2 have like 100 hours in each.
So the heat system at the end where you can add on those various modifiers to your runs.
That would be so, yeah.
Yeah. So for people that haven't played Hades, I'll just give you a quick bit of context. Basically, Hades is a game where you progress through a couple of boss fights in a given run. A given run might take you something like half an hour. And then once you've beaten the game a couple of times, you get access to the system that allows you to modify each of those runs. So you can do another run, but this time every enemy does twice as much health, or there's a new attack that's added to the boss's movesets, or it might be the traps do more damage, or you only have 1 HP, or like all sorts of crazy modifiers, right? And you can stack as many of those as you want in as many directions as you want. It gets really bonkers. That in Zombies would make so much sense. It would be incredible. And so what
I
you're
even
saying,
thought about it for this version,
right?
With the rage induce modifiers, it would be rage inducer modifiers. So you could turn it on and off at will. But realistically, if you started from round 1, you would know that it's active for that. And maybe if you had a certain number of heat and you did the Easter egg, or you reached 31 or something, they could have challenges for like the hardest of core players, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
And just give us, honestly, at that point, because I would recognize the number of actual people that would complete like a Heat 10 run where you've got 10 different modifiers all stacked on top of each other and you're doing Terminus, like that's going to be a vanishingly small number of people. So at that point, if you're not going to be able to allocate development resources to make like a full crazy Mastercraft blueprint shebang, something like fancy, fine. Even just a calling card for something like that, I think would still be so motivating for those people, because it would be acknowledgement from Treyarch that you were actually doing that thing. And I think right now, we've got speedrunners that are going crazy, not just getting sub 30 runs on Liberty Falls, for instance. We've seen
20.
sub 10 runs. Like, it's gotten ridiculous. Similarly, the high rounds, sure, there's calling cards for like, I think there's one called Another Round, and I think you get that for hitting round 100. Yeah, so that's great. I really love the fact that that's there. Put something in the game for like higher with some of these kind of heat modifiers on. People are going to be obsessed over that. It's going to become almost like a cult conversation point. It's going to become iconic in the overall culture of the game to be like, oh yeah, but I got like, I didn't just get another round. I got like another round on steroids, like the crazy one. Go ahead.
Speaking of Hades, one of the things that obviously the heat will be on the screen.
Yeah.
But also there's a timer on the screen. I don't know if they want people knowing they're in time, but there should be an option in the settings that allow you to see your time you're on.
That is so true. They would also probably save the speedrunning community a lot of hassle reviewing VODs from people.
Yeah,
and
it would just be in-game time. That's it.
Yeah,
Done.
yeah, that would be smart. So Treyarch, that would be an easy one probably to patch in, I would imagine. But yeah, like the idea of it gets to a certain weekend and they're like, okay, like it's 4th of July or something, and so the fireworks ammo mod from Black Ops 3 Zombies is being patched into the game, and all guns that are pack-a-punched have the fireworks effect for the next 72 hours. I'm running 50 Easter egg attempts in that time, if that's the case. Like, it would be so motivating. And weirdly, they've said at some point, and I can't recall where they said this or when they said this, but somewhere I'm confident that they said this game is going to have more LTMs in Zombies than any other Zombies game in the past. But we've seen no conversation about what those LTMs are going to be. And in all of the news for Season 1, there's no mention of LTMs. There's no mention of Jingle Hells. There's just like been nothing. And I'm kind of confused. I don't know if I dreamed that they said that there were going to be more LTMs and they're not. I'm confident that they said it at some point, but hopefully they kind of reveal that.
Maybe closer to the mid-season when they release the new map or whatever.
Maybe. It might be that they're sort of saving it so that in the mid-season, like the season reloaded graphic, they can put those in as new things as opposed to like, oh, that's old news. We already knew about that. That may well be why.
Yeah.
But give us more. Like, Jingle Hells is great, but actual modifiers to gameplay would be so much fun. Like, every single bullet has infinite penetration, and you can like just get a million zombies lined up.
That'd be insane.
Like, give us goofy stuff and just put it on for 24 hours and be like, yeah, play with it. Like, sure, exploit the game or do things in the game that are not the typical flow and that you're going to get loads of XP from, or you're going to get loads of headshots from, or whatever. But make that part of the experience, because then people are going to be excited to do those things, right? I feel like right now, that excitement potential is there, but the potential energy is being used on exploits the devs don't want you to do, instead of what could easily be converted into exploit-like behavior that the devs are actually giving you the opportunity to engage with those sorts of LTMs. I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
So unless I've missed anything, I think we've covered our target topic list today. I have one remaining question for you.
Sure.
You are a Warzone expert. I am absolutely not. I am curious, for a generic zombies player that we can use me as a sort of representation of right now, that doesn't really touch Warzone, isn't really into the mode, is there a reason or a motivation or some kind of objective that you think zombies players might find fun if they did tap into Warzone? Like, is there room for cross-pollination there to be fun, or how do you think about that sort of stuff?
So I would say for the vast majority of like Warzone, probably not as much. Back in Verdansk, they had the on-map Easter eggs, so there was about 3 or 4 of them. And throughout the year, there was these little data intel things you could gather, and I think that was a little bit more overlap. I had people in my community where they would go into Plunder, and this dude had his schedule where he would just take random people through these Easter eggs, the same way zombies, community comes together for those types of things. And back in Rebirth Island, as well as Fortune's Keep, they introduced like 4 or 5 different Easter eggs per map. Okay. And I would imagine that when Area 99 drops on the 14th, that will also have Easter eggs, obviously with ties to Nuketown. It'll probably have something with mannequins as well as some other Easter eggs. And I think for those types of things, it could be fun. Obviously, if you're not as good, maybe your SBMM won't be as strict, and it could be a little bit easier for you to get your stuff done. But I think those are good. But if multiplayer PvP isn't really for you, it probably won't be like grab you long term. But at least to do the Easter egg and maybe experience those parts, because if you like that part of that, or if you really want to do the camo grind, which that's another thing. That's the first time to Warzone. That could be good.
Oh, that's not been in Warzone
other than
before.
That, never been in Warzone. Never been. They've always shared their progression with multiplayer. So if you got a long shot in Warzone, it would be your long shot in multiplayer.
Right.
If you needed a long shot or a headshot or down or whatever the heck. Now this one, they're getting their first official 3rd mode camo.
Right. Okay. So the camo grinders are eating good this year. As much as
100%.
It's tricky in zombies, they're eating real good. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Because I've just always looked at Warzone, and I've played it very little to be honest. And part of that is just because I'm so sort of focused on all the zombie stuff that is always happening alongside. But part of it is also that I'm like, I could play this, but my brain is so objective based with the way that I play games now, because in zombies, I always have a goal in that way, that when I play Warzone, I'm sort of like, what should I be doing here? Like, yeah, I can just try and get kills, but like, is there something I'm missing to it?
People go for wins. They get the dopamine from that.
Yeah.
Some people like high kill wins. Some people just like high kills. They don't care if they win. They just want to go
focus on?
Me, I'm fine with getting a double-digit win. I don't need to go that crazy. I usually
just
like
a double digit,
solo.
just nothing
well,
big.
No, double-digit, like meaning like I'm okay with 12, 14 kills. The people in Warzone, like these pros, they're dropping like 30 or 40.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I'm 36. I don't even attempt to compete.
I mean, honestly, I think you put me in a game of Warzone right now, I think I'm getting 1 kill and then I'm dead. I reckon that's probably how that's going to go. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and I think we've actually covered some ground that it's hard to cover from just within the zombies bubble in the same way that we have. I think that we've got a sort of broad range of perspectives and stuff on it, which I've really appreciated. So thank you so much for being here. And of course, I'll have links to your channel and stuff in the description for people to go and check out your Warzone content as well. And maybe some of your camo grind stuff too, if you dabble with that a bit more this year as well for zombies. All right, thanks for watching, guys. That was so much fun talking to Jaygot today. Let me know who you'd like our next guest to be in the comments, and I'll see you next time.